The title sounds quite dramatic, doesn't it? The most dangerous. But today I'm going to tell you something about yourself that you are unlikely to be aware of, but has either massively impeded your life up to now, or made you successful in certain sections of it. It's something that stares us in the face in our minute-to-minute living as we go through life, only we don't see it. Take someone who's successful, a successful entrepreneur, or a successful criminal, or a successful salesman or woman. They have skills that they more than likely are aware of, and those skills combine with behaviors that give them a label or an identity. Our problems in life start, though, by not recognizing that we are acting out of a place of identity that we are not aware of, which means that we are unconsciously dictated to by that identity. And being dictated to by a part of you that you are not aware of is more than likely going to give you problems. So fasten your seatbelts as we dive into the world of understanding identities. Have you ever been watching a movie or reading a book and seen a certain character's behavior from it in yourself? Or listen to a friend tell you about some arsehole they met who behaved in a certain way, and you silently cringe because you've behaved the same way yourself? Or done something when you had too much to drink and the next day thought, I wonder what came over me, when it was something extremely embarrassing? Many people are familiar with the term identity when we, in the process of growing up, structure our personality to portray the way we want to be seen. As teenagers, we wear the right clothes and behave in a certain way to fit in. And as we mature, we let go of those immature behaviors. And as we move into adulthood, take on different behaviors. We might want to be seen as a businessman or a professor, or as someone sophisticated, or seen as a particular type of sportsman, a golfer, say. To portray these, we wear a mask, just like you see in the Shakespearean actors on the stage. And these masks we call an identity. The trouble is that many of these identities are compulsive, and we find them controlling us rather than we controlling them. I remember one of my clients saying to me after a session dealing with an identity where she realized she had been unconsciously wearing the mask of a subservient doormat, and afterwards saying, I've spent nearly 15 years of my married life kowtowing to my husband because of my beliefs about men being the boss. Now I've woken up and realized that he had his place in the family and I had mine, and that we had different roles to play, but as human beings we were equals. I'm very angry that I've been stupid enough to buy into that belief for so long and to deny myself the right to what I wanted to do. Identities, or subpersonalities, or parts, as they are sometimes called, operate in a semi-permanent and semi-autonomous region of the personality and are capable of acting as a person. This doesn't mean that we are schizophrenic or we are possessed, where some entity comes in and possesses our body. It means that we use identities in order to play the game of life, If you were to go to a doctor and say, "I have voices in my head," he would likely send you to a psychiatrist. What we don't realize is that we all have voices in our heads, that incessant chatter that we have to put up with when we're trying to get on with life. Psychiatrists deal with a different type of voice in our heads. As we will see, we have many, many identities that just move in and take over and act out whatever their role is. Only because we are not aware enough, we think that identity is us. Here is a vignette from a teacher friend of mine, which helps us understand what identities or subpersonalities are about. I taught drama to middle school students in 9-week segments. At the end of the year, I always saw certain classes again, during which time I would teach them public speaking. As almost everyone knows, public speaking is not something many people look forward to. In fact, it terrifies them. So I would teach my students how to create a speaker's identity, much like a role in a play. I would explain to them that we create identities all the time. Identities for hanging out with certain groups of friends, identities for parents, for special events, etc. And as I talked, I threw in a few ideas about how we often create identities that have nothing to do with who we are or what our values are. We create these identities to fit in, to please others, to make others feel we like them and are therefore worthy. We do this with guys or girls we like, and I'm talking to middle school students here, remember, but it suits all ages. We do it on the job, etc. At any rate, we talked about what a speaker identity was and how it functioned for the first and second class meetings. And then we got on with the class activities. They had to give speeches on certain assigned general topics, and then their final speech was on a subject of their own choosing. One girl, I'll call her April, gave a speech on being herself. April had started in my class wearing thick black lipstick, black hair, she was blonde, and black clothes, heavy boots, and lots of earrings. She slowly had changed in the last few weeks, and was, on the day of her speech, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. In her speech, she talked about what I had said about 7 weeks earlier regarding identities, and how we use them to fit in and please others. She talked about all the people she'd been hanging out with, who were the only ones in school whom she thought would accept her. She was, in her estimation, weird. Translate, extremely bright, with a really adult vocabulary and tremendous insights about life. So she gravitated to the kids who were different, began using the lingo of her friends, wore only black, didn't do much schoolwork, and pretty much flipped into a whole new identity. She talked about how, in listening to what I was saying, she discovered that she was not being herself, and she didn't even like the identity she had chosen. She had spent some time thinking about who she was, and decided that she could pretty much be anything she wanted to be, and she didn't need clothes or black hair to be herself. Now, the interesting thing is that she may have simply gone back into a different identity, but she was aware of that on some level. The point is, she gained a sense of who she was behind the identity. Take a moment to remember a time when you did something shameful or embarrassing, and give that identity a label or name. Some names people have come up with for extreme identities are the exhibitionist, the criminal, the coward, the people pleaser, the party animal, the loudmouth, and so on. The whole purpose of working with identities is to deal with their untoward ways by becoming more conscious of how they behave so that we are not under their control. Having an untoward identity is like having a tail that wags the dog. Below are some of the more common identities. How many of them are part of your toolbox? I'm going to tell you now about some identities of people that I've worked with. These are their stories. And obviously the names have been changed. So there was Kelly. I was the incurable romantic. My whole life focused on meeting gorgeous men and living the romance. Setting up moonlight walks on the beach, sipping wine on a rug beside a blazing fire, and of course, lots of sex. This excitement would last for a while, and then the romance would just fizzle out, and it was next. And on to another guy to experience that romance again. I started to see the pattern in this, and decided that the next guy who I liked, I would stay with. A few months later, the guy appeared on the scene, so sticking with my decision, I moved in with him. Before long, it was no longer romantic. He was still doing the right things, candlelit dinners, walks along the seashore, but for me, they'd lost their zing. I could see it was I who was the problem, and I hung in. My romantic identity had other ideas. It wanted out, and slowly she took over. I saw myself becoming nasty, snappy, irritable, critical, in short, a bitch. Add to this, I was now desperately unhappy with twinges of depression. My romantic was having severe withdrawal symptoms. It got to the point where, despite me caring for the guy, I had to leave. The day I moved out, the stars shone again. Instantly, I had a future to look forward to, a future with different good-looking guys wining and dining me in Paris, Rome, the French Riviera, and other romantic places. This gives you an idea of the power an identity can have over us. Someone like Kelly would have great difficulty getting married and settling down with one person. The romantic identity, if you have one, or any other powerful identity, just doesn't usually lie down and die. It has its own survival potential to live out what it's doing, and it has to survive. Kelly was aware she was playing the role of a romantic, but had no idea of what it was really doing, because on the surface it was fun. What she didn't see was that she was addicted to romance, and that it was scheming and manipulative, and that it destroyed others. So identities play a part in what we believe we can have, how much money we believe we can earn, and how our relationships will be. It would be okay if we only had a few identities, but we don't. We have many. And when all of them are being vocal, it's like listening to an orchestra tuning up before a concert, a cacophony. Imagine the porn star and the prude, the snob and the layabout, the coward and the bully, the fibber and the saint, all trying to live together in one room and trying to get into agreement. This cacophony is, of course, all going on in our heads. No wonder we get headaches. The purpose of addressing and really exploring the agenda of identities, then, is to discover all of their impulsive behaviors and get them to work in harmony with us. Why? Because an identity has its own agenda. It was, after all, created for a reason which now may be obsolete. But the identity is unlikely to know this and will continue to do the job it was assigned to do, and can seriously prevent us from achieving new fulfillments that we want from life. When we work with them, we are able to see that we are distinct and separate from the identity, and instead of being its behavior, we can observe its behavior and not get sucked into its behavior patterns. When this happens, our I is now in control, and we can use the attributes of the subpersonality or identity when we need to, instead of them taking us over. We remain the leader, while the identities are happy to work with us, as opposed to having their own agenda and telling us what to do. The more we work on these identities and get them into harmony with us, the more we are able to operate coherently, with more strength of purpose, more awareness, and more freedom, simply because their energy has been transformed so that they are now working with us. The recognition of identities explains why we behave the way we do. We're like chameleons, liking one thing 1 minute and disliking it the next. Seeing our behavior change when we talk to an appealing member of the opposite sex, our in-laws, our spouse, our kids, our mates in the bar, and the chairman of our company. We also notice that we talk about being in two minds about something. Note, please, many people, after hearing or reading about identities for the first time, form the idea that it's an identity causing them to do what they do, so they can fob it off all onto it. Much like, I didn't defraud the company I was working for, my criminal identity did. This might be a flippant remark, but what if a murderer identity took over and killed someone, and you are now facing the gallows? This is why they can be dangerous to us and why we need to understand them more. Our interest in identities is that by addressing them, we find that it is one of the most effective ways of dealing with destructive behavior that prevents our life from running the way we want it to run. Here is another identity that I think everyone has. It's called the critic. The critic is probably our most insidious identity, and like all identities, it serves us in some way. But for some people, the critic becomes so powerful it takes over their life and berates them to the point of immobilization. It becomes a chatterbox that never gives them any peace. Does this sound familiar? You really made a fool of yourself there. Can't you do anything right, idiot? Why can't you just keep your big mouth shut? She or he won't be asking you out again, and you'll be sitting alone at home in the evenings again. And what you did at work today? You're useless. What is wrong with you? A critic identity like this would be perhaps serving us if we'd done the can on the table in front of distinguished guests at a dinner party. Another way would be criticizing us if we violated our values. But for most of the time, our critic seems to revel in destroying us for doing the best we can. It would seem that our critic is born the moment we perceive that in some way we have been rejected by our parents and that therefore we are unlovable or unworthy. Obviously, we think, we must be doing something wrong not to be loved. In an attempt to ensure that we receive this love, set a standard for ourselves that no human being could possibly live up to. I have never come across anyone who had a destructive critic who did not have critical parents. Our peers also haven't helped. Can you remember a time when you were rejected by your playmates or weren't invited to a party? You more than likely went away asking, "What's wrong with me?" Rest assured that our critic will oblige in telling us, "You're too fat, you look weird, you aren't good enough, no one likes you, you can't do anything right." And then we have the people pleaser. And the script of the people pleaser goes like, if I don't do what they ask of me, they won't love me. I think we all have a people pleaser in us to some degree. In our desire to be liked or approved of, we will disregard ourself, our feelings, our integrity, and our respect just to be accepted. Here are some anecdotes from clients that I've worked with. Again, I'm using a different name. Prue. I used to get really pissed off with myself. I would meet a guy for a date and we would start to kiss and cuddle. When it got to the point when I should have said no, I couldn't because I didn't want him to not like me. So I would end up sleeping with him. Eventually I solved the problem by wearing a tampon every time I went out on a date. And then there was James. It was nearly home time at work, and while I didn't have any plans for the evening, I was looking forward to spending the evening with my wife. My boss came up to me and asked me very nicely if I wouldn't mind finishing a spreadsheet off before I went home. It was an hour's work at least, and I just heard myself saying, "No problem." Grr, it was a problem. I wasn't going to be paid for the extra hour, and I didn't want to do it. Stop for a minute and think of a time when you did something to please. Our mind probably takes the following steps, although it's likely to be jumbled. He or she won't like me if I say no, and they will show contempt towards me, and I will feel smaller and unliked. I will hurt their feelings, and I can feel what that will do to them. So to spare them the hurt of rejection, I'll just do it. Does this sound familiar? The people pleaser causes us to violate our integrity towards ourselves. The belief is, I am not important, worthy, that is, I don't count. The people pleaser has as its underlying drive a much distorted idea of selflessness. And then we have the womanizer. In this story from Fred. I didn't even know I was a womanizer until some irate female told me where to get off and that I was one. The thing about my womanizer identity was that it just needed to know it was liked, and women proved it was liked once I knew they wanted to sleep with me. The high was knowing I was lovable. The drive to fulfill this was totally unconscious, and it took me years to recognize it. Like a drug, I needed that high. It wasn't the sex, it was the high I wanted. So I went from woman to woman to woman. One of the things I realized about it was that it helped me escape from feelings of worthlessness or emptiness. Being aware of it now, and by working on to reduce its hold over me, I see how it operates, which has allowed me to settle down with one woman and enjoy my life with her. And then there is the workaholic. This is what a client I'll call Peter had to say. If I wasn't busy, it felt as if the world was about to come to an end. Putting in long hours at work was a joy, and when I came home I was on the computer sorting out my daily life. My wife used to tell me I would regret not spending time with the kids as they were growing up. But while they were important to me, I had more fun shaping my career. She was also miffed by the lack of attention I paid her. Any suggestion on her part of a package tour holiday, a walk in the park, or an evening together was just too much. Where was the excitement in that? As for an afternoon nap, forget it. Someone once said that sleeping was a pleasure. To me, it was a pain in the butt, an interference that got in the way of life. One of the biggest reasons why workaholics are workaholics is to stay one step ahead of their emotional pain, which they're not really aware of. It's unlikely they will even know about this until something stops them from being a workaholic, like being forced into doing nothing because of a life circumstance, and feeling the big feelings of emptiness and aimlessness start to take over. Let me leave you with some more common subpersonalities to think about. The top dog, the doting wife, the narcissist, the religious fundamentalist, the gambler, the voyeur, the exhibitionists, the control freak, the dependent, the shopaholic. The subject of identities is huge, and today I've just scratched the surface. Take your time to think about them. I talk more about them in depth in the premium page. Thanks for watching.